Welcome to Diversitas, a show at the intersection of diversity, business, and culture. We welcome you again, audience, to our podcast. Today we have on our show a really old friend. I mean, he's not old. He's actually quite young, but he's an old friend of mine. And just a great person and a great resource, Ron Baldwin, who is Director of Supplier Management and Diversity at Amerihealth. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Ron, I mean, so, we have these conversations all the time, so this one should be no different. First of all, thanks again. Always appreciate your time. Know that you're super busy doing what you do on a regular basis. Why don't we start out with telling the audience what you do at Amerihealth. I mean, you have a nice title, you're a director, but what is it that you do on a regular basis?
So what I do at Amerihealth as the Director of Supplier Diversity now, and we dropped Supplier Management, my responsibility really is to direct our initiatives that are local and national. So the goal is that I try to create economic impact for diverse suppliers. Also try to give diverse suppliers an opportunity to participate in our contracting process. So how we get there, part of that process is there's education internally, education externally, as well as connecting to advocacy groups to create those relationships to help me advance some of those initiatives. So in a nutshell, that's what I do, but it's much broader than that.
So let's talk about this concept of economic impact. So what is it that you do that would have an economic impact on diverse suppliers?
So what I'm seeking to do, prime example, if I'm able to connect a diverse supplier who I know is embedded in a diverse community or under-resourced community, and able to give them a substantial contract, then they in turn most likely will hire from within that community. So that's job creation, that's tax creation. The tax creation also gets me engaged with the advocacy groups, because now I'm tapping into what's important to the legislators. So that means I need to have those kind of relationships. But ultimately, I'm trying to create jobs through those companies, and those companies will, in a sense, teach those people they hire marketable skills that they probably wouldn't have had if they hadn't been hired by this company.
So let me ask you this. I'm a theoretical potential diverse supplier. What do I have to do, or where do I have to be to kind of qualify to be looked at seriously by you and your team?
So first thing you have to do for us, most of our contracts are, not most, all of our contracts are with the states. So the state and federal government have diversity requirements, meaning you have to be a certified diverse business. So that's the first step, to be a certified diverse business, because also our customers require that we provide them with a monthly report based on the amount of money we're spending with diverse suppliers. So our contracts require that.
Sorry to break in on you. You say certified, what does that mean?
So certified means you have to be 51% owned by an African-American, Asian Pacific, and Hispanic, and I believe there is one more that escapes me. But you have to be 51% owned by a minority person. Forgive me for not having a full definition, but I've been talking about it so much, I should know it. But that's the requirement, okay? And, some of the requirements is you're in a hub zone, one of those zones that are underutilized in terms of what their infrastructure looks like. They're trying to build that zone up. So if you're in that zone, that's like a double hit. So it means that you, in a sense, are bringing your business to an underserved community. You, by the definition, are paying taxes, and if your business is thriving, like for instance, anchor business like Lowe's of 52nd Street, they drive other business to come as well, which further develops that tax base and economic impact because they hire within that community. So they're job creators. Mm-hmm. You, in a sense, I would look at you as the same way. You're legal, but you will also probably more than likely get some interns to support your business. So you're developing young folks, which is a continuity process, as well as building your business with Caritas or your book of business. Then you would use Caritas, and I would help you to market Caritas so you grow your business with other corporations. So I would introduce you to my relationships and talk about the work you're doing for us, and can it be repeated with some of our corporate friends.
So, okay, so you need to be certified, and we understand that part of being certified is being 51% owned by a diverse person. Besides being certified, what else does a business have to bring to the table to qualify to potentially do business with an Amerihealth Caritas?
So that's a good question, Mike. So if you are, let's take something like IT. So IT security, that's a good one. You would have to have some experience doing IT security, cybersecurity, what have you, because most companies are not going to trust you with that kind of responsibility being a novice. So you would have to have some book of business that you can present in terms of an example of some solutions that you will provide, or some services or goods that you have provided to other companies. You know what I mean? And also you should have some references that will speak highly of the business and their experience with your company. And then that way you have something to stand on. You couldn't just come and say, well, I just started a business, I want to do business with Caritas. It doesn't work that way. And maybe it might work that way if you are a caterer, but those are businesses with low level entries, but law, such as itself, and IT and other goods and services require a higher point of entry, which means that you have to have some references to support what you're trying to sell us.
So let's go back to being certified for a minute, because I know there are a number of agencies, entities that can provide you with certification. So what are they?
So you have the National Minority Supply Development Council, which focuses on minority business certification. They're a national organization, and they have local chapters. Here in the tri-state area, you have the Eastern Minority Supply Development Council, better known as the EMSDC. You have WeBank, which is Women Business Enterprise Center. You have SEPTA, and those are the primary ones that we deal with at Caritas. You also have Small Business Administration. They also do certifications.
And so, I'm going in, so I go in, Ron, and I have all my paperwork in place. I have, my taxes are up to date. I have all of the licenses that I need to have and all that kind of stuff. But I also have a non-diverse partner. And although my paperwork says that I'm the 51% owner, the reality is that my partner kind of runs the business. I own the business 51%, but my partner runs the business. Is that okay?
On its face, that's okay. Because you've covered the legal responsibility of the ownership. Now, after I have a conversation with you and your partner, and I realize that your partner is actually driving the business, you know what I mean? That's okay too, to a degree, as long as you have a meaningful contribution to the business. You know what I mean? The customer he could outface to the customers. Maybe internally you're doing some great work internally, but you can't just be 51% owner and not have any contribution to the business. You know what I mean? Because that to me, you're misrepresenting what the business should be about. You as a diverse person who owns a business should be contributing meaningfully to how that business is growing and expanding. Because there are a lot of companies who do things like that. They may decide, well, in order to get access to these federal contracts or state contracts, or to grow my business, I need to get a diverse partner. I'll get a diverse partner may come to 51% owner on paper, but it's my business.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's okay if you are being mentored and developed by that partner. He's putting capital into the business. It makes sense to me because that you can grow like that.
Right.
But you have to be meaningfully contributing to the growth of your business.
So
and I can determine that by having a conversation with both of you, because you're not going to answer any questions. Most of the questions are going to be asked by the person with the vested interest.
Right. So let's take a step back, because I you know, it may seem obvious to you and it may seem obvious to me, but you know, why do we go through all of this? What is the need for all of this diversity stuff anyway, particularly as it relates to large companies like Amerihealth, Caritas, and other large companies? Why do it? What's the rationale?
Well, the diversity certifications allow us to track what we spend. It allows us to track how we spend it, ethically, how we spend it. Is that what you mean?
No, diversity initiatives, period. I'm taking a step way.
Well, you know, if you go back, so that's interesting you say that, but I mean, it's an obvious question. I understand it, because if you go back and look at the procurement spend with most corporations, you'll see that there's a huge inequity in terms of how you contract with diverse suppliers. Even if that corporation is selling a good or service that's sold to under-resourced communities. Part of what corporations should be doing is looking to, if your customers look a certain way, then your contractor should look the same way. How you spend money, how you invest in that community should look the same. I think Nixon started it back in the 60s when there was hardly any diversity with any company, and realized that they ought to have some diversity. If you're trying to help these communities, you got to help build these businesses so you have a tax base, that you create some economic impact and some revenue that's circular. That wasn't happening. So part of that process, what I just described, is why, one of the reasons why you have those diversity requirements at companies. You know, private companies, not so much, they don't have to, but most of the companies like Caritas, we have to have it because our customers require it. And that's a good point, Mike. You know, but if your customers require you to have diversity, and diversity spend as part of your contract, then it helps us really to broaden the process and the impact. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, you know, in a sense, we're all in this together, but we have to feel that way. You know, and corporations do have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that they support the communities that they serve. So
you know, obviously we know one another, and I know the job that you've done at Amerihealth Caritas. You've been at Amerihealth Caritas for years. And so I know that Amerihealth Caritas has been the recipient of a number of awards, et cetera, for the work that you do. And so what makes your program exceptional as compared to other diversity programs?
So I think a lot of large companies in the past used to spend money with organizations like the National Minority Supply Development Council, support them in terms of sponsorships. Maybe they sponsor $100,000. Well, Caritas, we can't do that because we don't have that much money to sponsor them. Maybe I'll sponsor 5,000 or 10,000. But I think the difference in programs is that I'm actually doing the work in terms of building relationships in the communities. You know, I'm talking to the diverse suppliers about what their pain points are. I'm advocating for diverse suppliers. I'm introducing diverse suppliers to legislators, to folks who I know can create an opportunity for them. You know, I'm mentoring diverse suppliers. I'm connecting to advocacy groups to advance that mentoring. So all these things will help them build sustainable businesses. And because I have a relationship with these diverse suppliers, I understand what their pain points are. And I'm taking the time to communicate that to our executive team to say, if we are advancing initiatives for diverse communities, doesn't it make sense if we have those same people we're trying to help at the table when we're thinking about how we develop these initiatives and advance them, so we get their input, so these initiatives are meaningful and impactful, and more than that, sustainable. How do we create sustainable growth for them? Who better to answer that question than the person needing the help?
Right.
I mean, I think my approach is just a common sense approach. I don't think diversity or what I do is any different than how I manage all the suppliers. What I'm simply saying is that we should be equal and fair on how we treat everybody.
Right.
It shouldn't be a difference.
So let's get into your story a little bit. How did you get into this area? What was your entree into diversity work?
So for a while, I was doing sourcing and procurement for years. And when I came to Caritas, we had an office of supplier diversity, mainly because the state of Pennsylvania required it, right? So I fell into it by accident because we had to meet these requirements and spend requirements for diverse suppliers. So we hit the mark. I think that when I came, our requirement was 1.7 million. So we were so excited. We hit that goal and what have you. It's like, wow. So after we hit the goal, and I saw the excitement, I started to think, wow, what happens if we exceed the goal? So from that point on, my goal was to exceed any goal they put before us. Let's exceed it, and let's make this part of the AOP goals, part of our corporate 5-year plan and what have you. So it took years to do that. But along those years, when I first got involved in diversity, the first thing I did was connected to the folks who I thought were doing it well. And so I talked to Jackie Hill, who used to be at the Enterprise Center. I talked to Nolan Atkinson. He was a lawyer, and I tried to talk to some of my counterparts. But those two, I thought, were unapologetically committed, regardless of what the optics looked like. They understood what the need was, what needed to be done, and didn't mind saying it no matter who. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't a topic of the day. I thought that's who I need to talk to, because they're going to tell me the real deal on how I can make this impact and what I should be doing internally to get support. So I talked to those guys probably for a long time, for years, just keeping abreast of my progress. I recently seen Nolan Atkinson, I think a couple of years ago. So I met you, man. You was crying that you couldn't get nothing done. Nobody was supporting you. So it's amazing what time and commitment will do. Because, when I talked about earlier, us being at 1.7 million excited, today our annual spend is at 130 million plus. It's 30% of our sourcing spend. So, which is a huge commitment on behalf of the company. And 30% is extraordinary.
So 30%, so your total annual spend is 130 million.
No, our total diversity spend.
Total diversity spend is $130 million.
And that's 30% of our total sourceable spend, our total procurement spend that the company spends, which is roughly about $500,000,
right?
$500 million. So I think that was a huge accomplishment. And now, everybody's engaged. They are engaged as much as I continue to drive awareness. And that's probably not even accurate. They are more engaged than they've ever been because we've done a good job of stating the obvious, what the benefits are. And once the corporations start to see the benefits, for us, it's about winning contracts. It's about advancing our mission to build healthy and strong communities. But economics is part of your health.
Yes.
Because I don't care how healthy you are. If you don't have no money, you're going to get sick.
Right.
You're going to be stressed out, all the things that come along with not being able to take care of yourself financially, even at the minimalist level.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. So I it's funny because as you were saying that, I heard somebody recently talk about, I know that you used to talk about, really as recently as last year, this concept called the social determinants of health, right? And so now kind of you guys have expanded that, is that right?
No, yeah, well, we call them the social determinants of life,
right?
Because
so
it's life.
Explain what that is. What is that?
So social determinants of health is communities that they don't have access to hospitals. They don't have access to healthy food. The housing is deplorable. And there are two other parts of that, but it's really everything that we enjoy and have access to, most of the communities don't. So if you send your kids to school and the first thing they have for breakfast is maybe an orange soda and a bag of chips, that's a food desert. You know what I mean? You don't start your day off with something that's unhealthy, because what that does, it leads to an unhealthy lifestyle and a shortened life expectancy and diseases and all kind of other things that come along with eating poorly. If you live in a home that's full of lead, once again, your surroundings are really not conducive to healthy growth. If you have to drive X amount of miles to a hospital, if you get sick and don't have a car, or not money for transportation, you become sicker. If you don't have access to health or providers, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. The things we take for granted, so many others struggle with that access to good care, which why we call the social determinants of health.
So the concept is that in your day-to-day business, meaning Amerihealth Caritas, one of the things that you try to confront on a regular basis is this concept of the social determinants of health, social determinants of life, correct?
Yep.
All right. And so in your role as director, what is your role in terms of addressing the social determinants of health or the social determinants of life?
So my role, that's an interesting question, because my role is really not aligned with that, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
So in the company, I'm saying I am part of that, and I am part of the solution, because if we can create job training for folks, if we can educate people on entrepreneurship, if we can contract with small businesses, then we by default start to mitigate that. Because like I said, now that you are a small business, you are hiring from within that community. Those folks that you hire are learning marketable skills, which will help them or assist them in getting better employment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're building a foundation in that way for the economics, and then the main part of our business is about wellness. You've already got that covered, but we can tie the two together. So now that we go to different states and look to be impactful, we don't have to just talk about the health. We can talk about the economics, how we tie it together. We can talk about the training, the education. So our approach is much broader from a healthcare standpoint, because we're looking at the whole person, the whole care, not just one part of it, because you can't be healthy with just part of your care being delivered. And I think as a business, we understand that it takes the whole, the whole company, the whole engagement to make this person whole. So how do you get there? That's the challenge.
How many states is Amerihealth Caritas in currently?
So right now, I think we are in, they're going to kill me for this. We are in 16 states, including the District of Columbia.
Okay. And how many of those states do you guys, or have you guys tried to create a supplier diversity presence, or at least have you be a presence within the supplier diversity community of that state?
Every state. So it doesn't matter. Some states don't require small business contracting as part of the RFP process. But Amerihealth Caritas' mission and philosophy is that should be advanced in every state, no matter what. Because you can't, even if it's not a requirement, it's how we do business. So we're not going to come to your state and not try to help and develop small business growth or encourage it. We're not going to do that. We're going to bring our whole self to make our communities that we serve whole as well. That's our commitment.
So you engage with a lot of small businesses. Give me your top 3 challenges that small businesses face, that diverse small businesses face?
Top three challenges, probably the first one is capital, access to capital. You know, how do we grow and how do we get capital that is afforded to majority companies, and how do we get that, I'm even gonna say equally, how do we make that process equitable?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's probably the biggest thing I hear from small businesses. The other thing I hear about is insurance. So insurance is something you don't really think about until you have a contract, and then you see the MSA or Master Services Agreement. And for IT, we require you to have maybe it's $5 million or $10 million in cybersecurity insurance. But maybe your revenue that you get from the company doesn't allow you to cover that because your contract doesn't really call for $10 million of an investment or that $10,000 it may cost you. You know, so that's really external and internal. It's educating folks that, you know, some of those processes need to be tiered based on the risk that you see the company bring into the company and the risk that they handle. You know, sometimes the 10 million is what it is, but I would try to advocate for folks that we reduce that and think about how we look at insurance, you know, equitably. Mm-hmm. Not just a one process. It's got to be based on your engagement and based on the risk of your engagement. And I would say the other piece that I hear from small businesses is, how do I get access to you? Because every company has a Ron Baldwin, but do you know how hard it is to get in touch with this person or to really find somebody that will have a conversation with me? So those are the three things that I hear the most.
So let's start with the number three, because that's interesting. What is the best way, what is the best way for diverse businesses to get in contact with with procurement diversity professionals like you?
I think the best way to get in contact, if you don't know me or people like me, is first of all, LinkedIn. Look at my connections, see where there's a common thread that can make that introduction. You know, the second thing I would suggest is look at the Eastern Minority Supply Development Council. Look at our memberships. If we're members of those councils and you're a member, they will make those introductions for you.
What is it? Before you go on, because a lot of people won't know, what is the Eastern Minority Supplier Development Council?
So the Eastern Minority Supply Development Council is one of the local, I guess, divisions, for lack of a better word, of the National Minority Supply Development Council. So they're a statewide organization with regional councils that serve different regions.
And support on what?
So what their job primarily is to help corporations contract with small diverse businesses. So they would be responsible for preparing those businesses to do business with corporations. You know, they hold a host of networking events, training events, everything regarding education, not just for the small businesses, but also for the corporations, to understand what the engagement process should look like. Mm-hmm. You know, to also promote those suppliers that are ready to engage corporations. You know, and they also will meet with corporations that have members and say, listen, we will help you develop an engagement strategy, a plan to increase your spend, to train internally. I mean, they do a host of different things, but I think for me, that's the most important part they play for me in terms of education. Educate those internal folks. So when I identify suppliers, we're now educated to the point where we understand the value we bring to those corporations, and we understand why it's important to get feedback and all the things that go along with the engagement. And when you engage us, it shouldn't be you engage us and then you left just like you came in. You know, so when you meet me, you shouldn't leave the same way. Right. You should leave to the better, right, and not like, wow, that was jeez. I mean, I don't want people to feel that way about me anytime. You know, I want your time with me to be well spent.
So how else can a diverse supplier contact, engage a supplier diversity professional like you? Besides, we talked about EMSDC, we talked about some other things, but how else can they get in contact with not only you, but people like you, people, people at Comcast or people at wherever?
That's a good question. I mean, because a lot of time you cold call people. The problem is with people like me, the more Caritas is national. So it's a team of myself and my manager, and then we have indirect people who help us. So we're always busy doing a lot of stuff, no matter what. The best way to contact me is via email. But what I've seen and what I've suggested to a number of different suppliers is to do a small video. Do a short video that's very concise about what you're trying to sell. Talk about, if you can, maybe a problem you solved and some references and email it. It is a passive way to meet somebody, to have an introduction virtually and have that person like me view your email without actually having to take the time or schedule a call. I can view it at my own leisure. And then if I feel like, you made a good point, I may schedule a meeting with you. But it's a good way to introduce yourself without actually trying to send emails or make all these calls or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I think it's a good introduction because, as a healthcare organization, all of our challenges are very public. You know what I mean? So if you do a little bit of research on healthcare and what the challenges are in terms of legislation or different states, adapting this legislation to advance care, you can see it. And if you do your research and you send me an email that sounds like you did your research, that's delivering a solution that can help with some issues, I guarantee you somebody will call you back. Mm-hmm. Even no matter what the company is, the research is very important because once you have a conversation, I will know if you've done your research or not. You will know if you've done your research or not because you can hear yourself sounding a little bit crazy. But right. You're too far along and you gotta continue. I mean, I always say, try to leave me with something that's memorable. And for all of us, just think about it's very competitive. What are you going to say that separates yourself from others?
Everybody else.
That in itself is a challenge.
Right.
Right. But first be authentic and be honest. That separates you. You already knocked out half of the people. And then talk about really how you're going to deliver the solution.
So I'm a new employee. I've just been hired to be the manager of supplier diversity at XYZ Corporation. There's nobody else there but me. I'm the first hire. George Floyd happened. Company's trying to figure out what it wants to do, how it can respond. It decides to hire someone at the manager level position to be able to do this work. What's the first thing I should be thinking about as a supplier diversity professional when I am looking to create a program for XYZ Corporation?
So I think, if it was me, the one thing I'll be looking at is who out there is doing it good, has a great program, who's doing it best, who do I benchmark against to understand what the infrastructure needs to look like, because you want to increase spend, you want to get corporate engagement, you want folks to support your initiatives, and you want to take advantage of this time period when you got George Floyd, you got all these things that are forcing corporations to say, listen, how do we change things? How do we invest in? So you want to be able to take advantage of that, but you want to be able to take advantage of it strategically. So the best way that I would think about, I would connect with the EMSDC, because that's a corporation that specializes in developing and advancing supplier diversity initiatives. That's the first thing I would do, probably, because I know that's where most of the folks who do diversity are members. And then I would talk to them, and based on their input, you should have enough to put together a comprehensive plan that you can build on. All you want to do is first, just put some foundation together, but you want to check the temperature of your company to see what that engagement looks like.
Right.
If there is no engagement, then you want to try to incorporate some training, so how do you create awareness, sustainable awareness to help folks that put people in a place where they understand and want to be a part of it. Because you're dealing with a lot of different things when you come into a place where there's no diversity program, like unconscious bias. Folks are unconscious about their actions because their counsel and people who inform them look like them. So the counsel is very limited, or it looks like, just talking to yourself in the mirror. Mm-hmm. So you want to get people from different backgrounds having conversations. I think one of the things we did at Caritas, we have an ARG, employee relationship group, and there's multiple ones, but they advance the different concerns or bring them to the forefront of senior management. You have a Black ARG, Hispanic, you have LGBTQ, you have veteran, and then we all talk to each other, because we want to collectively support each other. But at that level, you want to have the same process at a senior management level. You want to talk to everybody, because as a diversity professional, I have to talk to the entire company.
What should I be demanding? So somebody offers me the job and I look around and there's nobody there and I know I'm going to be it. What am I demanding from the company to ensure, or at least to give myself a better opportunity to be successful in the job?
You want a staff and you want a budget. Because if you're just being hired, you have no staff, you have no budget, then they're just checking the box. So how long would you be there if I don't have a staff and a budget? Anything that's meaningful at any company either has a staff and a budget. And most of them have both. Mm-hmm. Finance team has a full team and a budget. Why? Because it's important to them. So you got to think about, there's some common sense things you understand when people are serious about your position or not. You got to have a budget and a staff.
Mm-hmm. So, it's interesting because to me, I'm looking at it from certainly the outside in. I don't work for a corporation, although I do business with corporations. But everything changed after George Floyd. Mm-hmm. Tell me, as somebody who works within a company, I'm interested to know, how did that whole thing create this kind of catalyst for more activity within companies?
So George Floyd was unique and interesting because George Floyd only highlighted what people in the community already knew. But I think actually seeing that officer's knee on his neck showed that there are law enforcement and policing inequities and racist police that have terrorized our communities. So everybody saw it. So what George Floyd did was say, wow, we really need to have a deeper conversation with these communities and understand how we can help. The challenge for most people like me, and maybe not me, because I think Caritas is a little bit more progressive, but most people like me is, how do we take this moment and maximize it? Because everybody's throwing money, we want to support you. They've hired chief diversity, equity, inclusion officers. Everybody all of a sudden got a diversity program. It was like amazing what you couldn't do for years, you were able to do overnight.
Crazy.
It just astounded me. But the challenge is, how do I change this into a movement and not a moment? So I know I need X, Y, and Z. When I say I know that I'm talking about we collectively as diverse professionals. Right. We know we need budget. We know we need relationships. We know that we need metrics internally. We know that we need to measure everything, ethnic spend, total spend, departments spend, who's engaged and who's not. And we need a process to make sure that those who are not engaged with senior management or executive management saying, we want total engagement. And how do we hold these folks accountable? You know what I mean? We want everything recorded as part of your evaluation process and your merit increase. Because if no money is attached to it or no money, nothing hits your pocket, more than likely it's just a moment.
In other words, diversity initiatives tied to comp.
Yeah, tied to comp. They ought to be part of your strategic plan. So that's what folks should be looking at to make sure that you're not just stuck in the moment. Because next year, you're like, yeah, it happened, whatever, it's over. I mean, and that's just the historical, that's just the historical view. That's what happens. You know,
have you ever seen anything like this before, though?
I haven't seen anything like this except for 9/11, when, you know, everybody kind of realized that we're under attack. You know what I mean? And folks are saying, well, you know, this community's been under a similar attack for a long time. But it's funny how it feels when we're under attack. We all need to come together as people. And that's probably the key thing, Mike. We're not really talking about diversity. We're talking about human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's missing in the conversation. We're all humans, not black, white, whatever. Those are things that divide you, you know. But we all have one thing in common. We're human. And we're better together. You know, somehow that argument is being pushed to the side.
Because it's funny, because I was just thinking about, now how old was I? I don't remember how old I was when Rodney King happened. But I don't recall there being the same kind of response in our country. And like Black people were outraged, right? Of course.
Right, right.
But I don't recall the same response from other people besides Black people.
Right.
Rodney King, like there was with George Floyd, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe it was just like an accumulation, because you had, before George Floyd, you had Ferguson, and you had Ahmaud Arbery, and you had something else big that happened, all in the span of really like a year to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I guess George was the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it takes I don't know. One is enough, you know what I mean? But obviously in America, you know, we see things differently. You know, you got children getting shot daily, turn the news on. It's like, you know, I mean, it desensitizes you, but I mean, you don't want to ever want to become desensitized to something that impacts one person just because it hasn't impacted you. Things are systemic. It's coming your way.
Right.
You know, whether you like it or not. But like I said, you know, if we look at each other as human, then everything will impact us. But when you look at people as Black and brown and this color and that color, well, it's the Black and brown people. You know, I mean, with the economics, nobody talks about the history of why we got here, why the communities look like they look, you know, because, I mean, you know, to some degree, things that prohibited you from making a meaningful contribution to society were federal laws on the books until the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Can't move to this community, redlining, you know, underselling your house, undervaluing your house. You can't develop any wealth, which, you know, a lot of folks early on use their houses to send their kids to school. But, you know, in Black and brown communities, because we were living in places that didn't have any value, there was no value in your house to send to school. You know, so there's a lot of things historically that people need to look or remember, but oddly enough, nobody can remember it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I don't know what I was looking at recently, but, you know, to me, one of the major issues that we have as a society, American society, is that we don't want to acknowledge our history. Like, we spend a lot of time like acting like that this whole thing Didn't happen. Like we have a history that informs our culture, which necessitates the need for some of the stuff that we're talking about, that we talk about on a regular basis. If we all look, to your point, if we all looked at each other just as human beings, we bleed the same, we get the same diseases, et cetera, then we probably wouldn't have these issues. The reality is our history informs us that we don't look at each other the same. Our history informs us that we've looked at each other differently and we've treated each other differently for centuries, right? And so what we're trying to do now, and what you try to do on a day-to-day basis, and what I try to do, certainly not the same as you, but what I try to do on a day-to-day basis is to help our society to create solutions to problems that were created by virtue of how we look at each other, by the fact that we don't look at each other as human beings as much as we should, that we are not as, it is, our culture is still rife with, discriminatory behavior and intent and feelings and motives and all of it, right? And so it's almost like you feel like you are swimming against the biggest wave ever, right? Trying to get through so that people and families of color can have a better tomorrow than they have today.
Absolutely. I mean, I got a friend that always tells me the strength of the wolf is in the pack, which tells me why, first of all, you need to educate others. You need to have relationships, of like-minded thinkers who seek to be better, build better opportunities for everybody. But recognizing there's inequity, that some folks need more help than others. If I'm 6'4" and I can seal the fence, and the other guy's 5'2", well, he needs to have a crate so he can seal the fence. That's equity.
Right.
Not equal. Equity.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And part of what I realize is that, we need to have relationships, but we also need to understand, what I need to be very sensitive to is that there are some folks who really may not be exposed to different communities and different groups like myself. Even at Caritas, the management team, and I shouldn't seek to try to hold those folks accountable and say, listen, I need you to do X. I need to help them to understand what that inequity looks like. Because if I don't see it because of where I'm at or where I'm from, I don't know if I can always blame them for that. But once you're educated and you're aware, now I can hold you responsible. So part of what it is, I can't be angry about anybody's position in life, but I can help you to understand and appreciate your position, how you use it to help others to build opportunities or successfully go after opportunities.
Yeah, one of the challenges I think we have now, Ron, is, and I know we're running short on time, but one of the challenges we have now is that there is I wouldn't even call it an undercurrent at this point. There is a current in our culture that is actively seeking to ignore our past, our history, right? This whole, brouhaha over race, what do you call it?
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory, right? Critical race theory is a fancy term for history. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Looking at our presence through a historical lens. That's what we're supposed to. People, we do that all the time. Like that's in all kinds, not just in race, just in all, but we don't want to do it as it relates to race.
No.
We could do it in terms of economics. We can do it in terms of whatever else, but we don't want to do it in terms of race, right? Because race is the third rail of our country.
Yep.
And it is, and I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say that as a diversity professional, we have to be very careful about how we present context to people so that they can get the benefit of understanding the history without necessarily stepping on that third rail, which puts people, now
Mhm.
alienated people because the messaging wasn't palatable, right?
Absolutely.
So, it's tough. What you do is tough, my man.
Mhm.
What you do on a day-to-day basis is tough. And my hat's off to you for the contributions that you make and you continue to make.
Absolutely appreciate that, Mike. My job really, I mean, it reminds me of church. I used to be the vice chair of the trustee board. Done a lot in church, taught Bible study, but it's a ministry. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So ministry means that you have to be committed even when things don't look like they go on your direction.
Yes.
But you have to have faith that things will turn. You know what I mean? As I talked about earlier, going from 1.7 to over 130 million in spend, I didn't see that. But I kept doing the right thing for the right time, for the right reason. And eventually, if you continue with that kind of thought process, things will pay off and you realize that your mission or your life is a journey. And along that journey, you ought to be supporting and lifting others up. And likewise, people in return will do it for you. But you don't have to expect it, but you should continue your track and your path.
Ron Baldwin, thank you so much, my brother, for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you, bro.
And we thank you for joining us once again for another episode of Diversitas. We look forward to having the conversation and keeping it going. Thank you and take care.